got one that can see.
Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. Prager University has put out a new video entitled Be a Man, Get Married. This is my 2 cents worth on the video, and some other content contributors have also done theirs. If you haven't checked it out, you might be interested in hearing their argument, although I don't see how it would convince anybody to want to get married. If anything, it further solidifies what MGTOW has been saying all along. In fact, they may as well entitle the video Be a Service Animal, Get Married. The video starts out talking about the piece of paper, the marriage contract, and how valuable it is, and how it might be the most valuable thing that you'll ever own. But in reality, I won't own it. My wife would, since she would have the majority of the legal power in the relationship. The story tells about a man named Doug Talby, who for all we know isn't even a real person, and for all we know is divorced by now. It basically is cherry picking, saying because he got married and he did A and B that your life will be the same. But I can count to countless other anecdotes of people I know personally who had the exact opposite experience after getting married. So I don't really think it's a very compelling argument simply because this is one person's story. And again, we don't even know if it's a real person or whether, they've continued to be married after all this time. A lot of the video talks about working harder and more strategically, but I think most of us would actually prefer to work less in the long run. And marriage would put that off by about $200,000 per kid, and even more when you think about how much the average wife spends. Earn more money than your single peers from similar backgrounds, but earning more doesn't mean very much when your expenses are increased by a multiple of 2, 3, 5, 10, so on and so forth. Plus, when you're married, you're locked into the expectation of earning more. As a single person, you're far more flexible and have a larger hedge if you lose your job or there's another financial meltdown. The video actually says spend less time with friends. I don't think much has to be said there. I don't see how that's a positive. You go to bars less and church more. Well, if church is your thing, cool, but for a lot of people it isn't. So I don't know how that's a positive. Married men work 400 hours more per year than single men. How is that going to sell anybody on the idea of marriage? That means that you're either working yourself to an early grave, or your wife and kids are so obnoxious that you'd rather be at home, or rather that you'd rather be at work than home. Married men are much less likely than their single peers to quit their current job. So they don't have any flexibility as far as work goes. Apparently, being locked into a job that you maybe even hate is a positive. Giving up your power and bargaining position at work is somehow a positive. Just stay at that job that you hate because you have no other option. I mean, here you are, you have to work. You're a slave to the grind. You don't have any options to maybe take a risk to get a better job. Married men earn 20% more than their single peers, but it doesn't really matter because their expenses are going to far exceed that 20%. After marriage, men assume a new identity. I mean, is that necessarily a positive? I mean, what if you like who you are? Marriage gives men a sense of status and meaning. Well, lots of things give people a sense of meaning and status. I mean, this argument can be made about negative things. For instance, a terrorist may find meaning and status in what they do. I mean, how is that necessarily a positive? Married men are motivated to maximize their income, but this isn't necessarily a good thing for all the reasons previously listed. Employers prefer and promote married men, or men who are married. Well, of course they do. The yoke of a wife and 2.1 kids is a pretty heavy one. This also means married men are more likely to be treated badly because they can't say no. Married men benefit from the advice and encouragement of their wives. In other words, married men give in to the constant nagging and demands of their wives. Marriage is a clear path to a better life, and now we have the data to prove it. Well, I mean, I think we've just shown right here that a lot of that, doesn't prove anything about married life being better. Again, it's just more tradcon propaganda. And throughout the video, first of all, they talk about Doug Talby joining the military. Now, the video is entitled Be a Man, Get Married. I find that to be a slight on all the single soldiers who aren't married. Are they somehow not real men, yet they're serving in the armed forces but not real men because they aren't married? I mean, come on, it's just more, par for the course shaming language that isn't convincing anybody at this point. We talked about how it presented less time with friends and more hours at work as a positive thing. It's because you have to work, because you have all these people now you're supporting. Which brings me to the other part. What happened to equality in marriage? I mean, the video made it sound like the man, the entire burden of supporting the family and everything was on the guy. What is the wife doing this whole time? I mean, he sounds like he's bringing a lot to the table, but they don't talk about anything that she brings to the table. They don't talk about anything that she's done or that she's brought to the marriage. You earn more, but you keep less because now you're splitting it 2, 3, 4 different ways. It has a transformative effect on the man, the video says, but doesn't talk about how it transforms the woman in any positive way. It's almost to suggest that the problem is only with men and that women are fine the way they are, but it's men that need to change. It's men that need to transform. And again, I brought up the point, is he a real person? Is he even still married? Because there's plenty of stories that start out a lot like Talby's story, but don't necessarily, they just kind of tell you this, that, or the other about, he was living at home, working at a factory, and then he joined the military, and he took every opportunity to get a promotion, and then got out and ended up working as a financier or whatever at a car lot. But they don't really tell you what happened from there. Again, is he still married? I mean, now that he has, he's supposedly making these 6 figures a year. When the marriage eventually implodes, if it does, that's just half of his stuff that he's not going to see anymore. And throughout the whole thing, they never once asked Doug Talby the one question that seems to me the most important of all, and that is, was he happy? I mean, it goes without saying that, his wife was being well took care of. I mean, she didn't have a want or a worry in the world. And so it's to be assumed that she was happy. And if she wasn't, it's kind of shown that he goes, one step up, if need be, takes another job or gets a promotion to this, that, and the other to continue to make this woman happy and to make this marriage work. But it doesn't really talk a whole lot about what she does to make the marriage work, or what she does for him, or anything that she does at all for the relationship. It seems to be all him, and she's just kind of sitting back, having things done for her, being provided for, and everything else, and that's kind of just her role. The fact that a video like this at all would come out, the fact that videos like this are coming out all the time from TradCons and others to try to convince men that marriage is a good thing, should be telling to people in MGTOW and the manosphere in general that our arguments are getting out there, our ideas are getting out there, whether we intentionally mean them to or not. We're simply walking away. We're not revolting. We're not throwing a revolution. We're just going our own way. And you see the effect that it's having on the society. That they're trying now to convince us, with poorly laid out arguments, by the way, that marriage is a good thing for a man. I mean, throughout that whole video, I never got the sense that this man that they were talking about was even a human being at all. I got the sense that he was just some workhorse. Some stud out there plowing the field, some service animal out there, and his importance as a person had nothing to do with who he was as a person or a human being or a personality or anything, but rather what he could provide, what he could contribute. And that's the sense you get, that the woman in and of herself doesn't need to change. The woman in and of herself doesn't have to do anything. She just has to show up and her very essence as a woman is enough. But for the man to quote unquote be a man, he's got to get married and do all these things. I mean, his personhood, his humanity doesn't exist. It's more what he can do, what he can provide. You know, he essentially, as an entity, doesn't exist unless he's providing for someone else. But as I said, at no point did anybody ask Doug Talby whether he was happy. It wasn't even brought up. So, again, watch the video. I don't see how anybody with any kind of independent thinking ability could walk away from it thinking, man, I need to go out and get married right now, because they never address the issue. And that's the thing. Part of the reason why MGTOW exists, part of the reason why men are not getting married, why the marriage rates are dropping, why men, and again, it's men walking away from this, not women. Women stand everything to benefit from marriage. I mean, if it doesn't work out, cash and prizes. It's almost like a retirement plan for some of them. I'll find some guy, and if he'll make me happy for a couple of years, and then when he doesn't make me happy anymore, I can drop him, and I get half of his stuff and maybe the house, and of course I'm going to get the kids and everything else, and if I need help, the government's going to be there to help me with every program imaginable. But for the man, he stands to lose his children. He stands to find himself in financial ruin, losing half of what he has, losing his home. I mean, there's been a lot of men who were wealthy, successful men who ended out on the street. And don't think that it can't happen to you. See, that's the problem, is that many men think, oh, it's not going to happen to me, and this, that, and the other. Look at all the celebrities. Look at all these, and some of them not even married to women who were celebrities. Some of these people were married to just your average everyday person who nobody would have known had it not been for them marrying them, and basically them becoming a famous person's spouse or whatever. But look at all those guys: rich, successful, handsome, far more in the top 20%, if you want to say that. Far more money and fame and all that than many of us can dream of, and yet they are not immune to being divorced either. They are not immune to the voraciousness that is hypergamy and trying to keep the modern woman satiated and happy. And so, and if you look too, there's been many videos done on this here recently, and I haven't read very much into it, but I have seen some people talk about how women are even having ceremonies where they marry themselves. So they are full on the marriage bus, even if they can't find somebody that wants to marry them. Some of them are so vain and narcissistic they'll marry themselves. And so, make no mistake, it's the men walking away from this, and the society, the culture, they know it. That's why all these videos are aimed at men, to try to shame men back to the plantation, to try to shame men, to say, well, you're not a real man if you're not married, or you're not a complete man if you're not married. And yet, in none of these instances does anybody ever stop and think to ask the one question that is at least relevant to most men: is, am I going to be happier married? I mean, it's not the same institution that it once was. And I think most of us, well, let's put it this way. If you could show that being married is better for a man, and that it's better than MGTOW, then a lot of us would probably go back to that way. But the point is that the genie's out of the bottle, and that you can't show us that, because it's an idea, it's a thing that never existed to begin with. The way we viewed it and the way that it's always been are two different things. The fairy tale's over, the genie's out of the bottle, and there's just no going back. We can't get fooled again, as they say. This has been the Days of Thunder. I am John Nada, and remember, you are free to do as you're told.